Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, our series of shows previewing Super Bowl 59 with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles continues. Caesars Superdome in New Orleans this Sunday, and we are pleased to have back with us someone we've seen on the show multiple times, a good old friend of mine. Will Arndt is back. We haven't seen him actually since July, and if you remember the last time he was on the show, he made the prediction that it was going to be a Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl. So I said, of all the guests I'm inviting this week to talk about the big game, how can I not bring Will back onto the show when he called for this very Super Bowl to take place back in the summer, Chiefs, Eagles, and here he is with us again. Will, what's up, my man?
Hey, Ian. Good to be back with you guys. Let's talk some ball. Let's put a cap on a great NFL season. Give you guys some good picks, some good insight going into this last big game.
You look like you're traveling. Where are you right now?
I am in the great state of Florida.
I was going to say, is the Gator hat giving it away? Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to give you guys a little view into the back, but it's just being a glare. So that's why I decided to move. But yeah, I'm over at the ESPN Disney World campus right now in Orlando, Florida. So enjoying the sunshine, and my folks from back in the Northeast are getting slammed with snow. So I'm enjoying the break and the sunshine down here right now.
I'm sure you are, and maybe rubbing it into the folks too. That I'm in the warm weather. You're not. Yeah. You're suffering up there in the north like the rest of us, no doubt. But how are things in the life of Will Arndt lately before we get into the big game?
Things are good. Got some interesting stuff going on behind the scenes with football, but I've just been training. For those of you that don't know, I'll be playing in the new IFA. It's NFL style rules football. It's kind of like Sun Belt and Mexico, and I'll be going to San Antonio, which is a new development from another team. But I'll be getting down to San Antonio, playing in the air raid for Hal Mummy, and got a couple of things going on that are in the works that I can't technically say yet. But all's good, training, doing football, and love talking football whenever I get a chance. And talking to some coaches too about when I'll get back into coaching and all that good stuff. So yeah, man, football's a great thing. It's basically my life, and let's talk some ball.
No doubt. So you're going to be playing for the San Antonio team. Did I hear that right?
Yes, sir.
Well, then you better check out Southtown 101. Friends of mine who I do Pub Sports Radio, one of my YouTube channels I've done shows with. They're situated in San Antonio. In fact, I was down there for an event they put on years ago. Southtown 101 is run by a man named Jeff Slaughter, who runs the YouTube channel for Pub Sports Radio, which I've been part of. So you better check out that place when you're playing there in San Antonio. Tell them Ian Cameron sent you at Bobano, and they'll know exactly who the hell I am. So
for sure, let's get Jeff and I linked up. That's terrific.
No doubt. It's a great spot. Great karaoke. It's a nice little cozy, quaint bar. The karaoke scene is great there, and I've taken part in it when I was down there a couple of years ago, because I love music. So it's a great bar. So definitely check out Southtown 101 when you're playing there in San Antonio. Kansas City, Philly. Let's talk a little Super Bowl, Will. And like I said before the show, you guys have already seen me talk about this game here on the Football Frenzy show already, because we've recorded a couple episodes already to talk about this game with other guests. So you don't need to hear from me for the millionth time. So it's going to be all about our guest here, Will Arndt, and side total and player props that he likes and analysis that he has for this game. Chiefs, Eagles, of course, as always, really the point spread has stayed pretty much stagnant in that 1.5 range for the Kansas City Chiefs as favorites. 48.5 the total. Really not much movement in the side or the total for this game for the last couple weeks. The floor is yours, Will Arndt. What do you think here? Chiefs, Eagles. You can take it any way you want as you break it all down here.
Yeah, doing a little bit of homework. It's funny to have this thought, and I wanted to make sure it's not based out of ego. Being that this was kind of what I saw happening before the season. And if you asked me a follow-up question on who would I thought of would have won that Super Bowl matchup, I would have given you the answer that I thought it would be the Chiefs. And sitting here, present day, all new facts, all new things to consider, I would still have the same answer. And being that the game is almost a pick-em, I was doing a little bit of homework, and even still, I just feel like the championship pedigree, the familiarity, the coaching advantage, which I think is decidedly Kansas City, in my opinion, based on just the personality that they impact on their football teams with Spags in that defense and Andy Reid in that offense and the quarterback coach continuity or chemistry is probably a better word. I think that's a huge thing. And going through and looking at injury reports and projected starting lineups, it is absolutely clear that the Philadelphia Eagles have superior talent. If you just go guy for guy, but where it's important, I think that's kind of the equalizer. And I think those things matter quite a bit. Skill position players, there's no question. The Eagles have better players. Offensive line, no question. It's, the Chiefs have a good line and they're well coached, but I just think personnel wise, it's pretty clear Philly is the way to go. But I just feel like Kansas City's played in a lot of close games all year. And again, we're talking macro here, just on the game. They're used to it. They're used to the emotion of this game. You listen to past players that have played in this game, they just say that it's just different. It's not just another football game. The timing, the irregularity of things, the pageantry, the extra time to prepare, the media, just if the fact that you do like anything in life more often, you get used to it. And I think that's just going to bode well for Kansas City. I don't think they feel a lot of pressure going into this game. The three-peat crap. When you're a player, like, don't put more pressure on yourself because of something like that. It's just a bonus that you happen to fall into. And I think where it's important, they're buttoned up and they're going to be great situationally. And they're healthy. They've had time. You give a mastermind like Andy Reid 2 weeks, you're going to see some things in the game that are going to be popping. But Philly's going to have athletes and they're going to make plays and all that good stuff. But I like Kansas City to win in a close game. Maybe pretty similar to what we saw about 2 years ago.
Yeah, where they obviously the same two teams matched up a couple years ago in the playoffs. It was down to the wire with it. Let's be honest, a very, very questionable, dubious defensive penalty call late in that game against Philadelphia to put Kansas City in a position where automatic first down inside the 10, they could run the clock down right till, just a couple seconds left and kick the game-winning field goal. Yet that being said, Kansas City moved the ball, got down there in a position to score. And like I said, they've just been a master of those close games, being able to pull them out and make those critical plays, at the right time. I think the thing that stands out to me is just, and I've talked about this, it feels like I've taught so much Kansas City on this show because they're always making these deep playoff runs. The Andy Reid and coaching staff with extra time to prepare angle cannot be discounted. I mean, it is just remarkable. The just impeccable track record of winning and success that the Kansas City Chiefs have had with extra time to prepare under Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And of course, that's at their disposal here for this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm with you. A lot of what you said, I'm totally with you. Even including the Eagles, I think have just, if you match up unit by unit on the football field, I think you can make a case the Eagles have the better offensive line. I think you can make the case the Eagles have the better defensive line. That being said, if Chris Jones is going to play like a monster and George Karlaftis brings it like he has at times in the playoffs, their pass rush can, hold their own with anybody. So, but it's closer on the D line. To me, it's as far as a difference between the two teams, I definitely think O-line advantage Philadelphia for sure. No doubt. Linebacking core, I like Bolton for Kansas City, but that linebacking core for Philly's pretty good. That's pretty close. You could split hairs with that. Mm-hmm. Secondary, I've still got to give the edge to Philly. And this is no disrespect to McDuffie and the corners that Kansas City have that are solid, but I think they're just, when you got a Darius Slay and you've got just the emergence of your Quinyon Mitchells, who's just a rookie, and Reed Blankenship and Cooper DeJean, who has just been absolutely spectacular, for the Philadelphia Eagles in that secondary, it probably tilts the scales in their favor. But at the end of the day, quarterbacks, surely Patrick Mahomes, you got to give Kansas City the edge at that position. And this is not a slight on Jalen Hurts, who's very capable of playing well, but obviously you're talking about, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, the greatest quarterback, right now in the NFL, in Patrick Mahomes. You have to give him the edge. And I still have to give the coaching of Kansas City the edge in that department. And again, I like Sirianni's. I'm not a big Sirianni fan, but I like who he brought in. Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio are quality coordinators. There's no question. Nothing wrong with what Philly's got at the coaching staff department, but you still have to give the edge to Kansas City. You're talking about Andy Reid, talking about Steve Spagnuolo, and these two guys have just been masters of getting their team to play at their absolute best. And it seems like Kansas City, year in and year out, and we've even seen it in this year's playoffs, and we saw it on the fourth down play that got Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills off the field at the end of that game. It's almost like they know what play they want to run and they execute it to a high level. The opponent doesn't do that. The opponent seems to be a little more unsure of what are we going to do in this situation. And then they don't have that same level of execution. Kansas City's like, okay, we see this on offense from the opponent. We see this on defense from the opponent. This is what we're doing. They execute the play more often than not successfully. I think that's what sets Kansas City apart in this great run of theirs over the years. Do you kind of see it that way?
I do. And as you were saying that, I was looking back on an old Patriots clip this week, and they were talking about a play that they wanted to call. And obviously, the comparisons for a lot of people was this Chiefs dynasty with the Patriots dynasty. And one of the things that happens is when you get to this point this much, it slows down for you. It's not as big. And there was a great example in this Patriots dynasty. They waited until the second half of a Super Bowl to call this said look so that they couldn't talk about it at halftime. That's what I feel like this Chiefs team does. They have the wherewithal and the experience and the championship pedigree to understand what they want to do and when they want to do it, and not being sped up by the moment of the game. So I expect them to be prepared situationally. I think special teams, they'll be buttoned up. And when it matters, because I think we all would agree, we don't see this game really getting out of hand. I expect them to be well prepared and well equipped and probably do something that is going to shock all of us in terms of, wow, that was really clever, or great play design, or what a time to call that. So
never seen that before. Something
yeah.
like that. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yep. Yeah, no question. It wouldn't shock me at all to see that. All right, let's break it down one side of the ball versus the other, and I'll just throw it right to you. Again, I've talked about this game a lot already this week, so we're here to listen to what Will and what he thinks. Kansas City offense versus Philadelphia defense. We'll start there. Just anything that comes to mind about what stands out to you about that matchup.
Yeah. I think if you go back to, as I was doing a little homework on this, past Super Bowls and really just playoff Patrick Mahomes, they were going to empty the clip. And 4 or 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls they've played in, Patrick has thrown the ball over 40 times. Additionally, in all 4 of those games, he's ran the ball more than 5 times. He's averaging 6 yards a rush in all those games. So I expect to see high usage from Patrick Mahomes. And I think that ultimately bodes well, putting the ball in his hands, finding ways to get it done. If the guy is going to have an opportunity to close out a game, go win a game, got to have it, and he has 4 downs, it's really hard to bet against him and trying to find a way to get it done. He's only 29 years old. He's plenty mobile, and he obviously has the experience and the wherewithal to know how to get it done now. So I think that's just something macro why I like the Chiefs, because I think they're going to let him, it's not, I don't think it's going to be one of those games where he's going to throw it 23 times and he's not going to run the ball that much like you saw in the regular season, because they're just picking their spots. So I like that matchup. Obviously, there are things like a Jalen Carter, which I thought was interesting, being sick during the week. Is he going to play? How is he trending? There's guys that are just disruptors and difference makers, and it makes you think back to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl matchup, where that was the one time, obviously, this Chiefs team lost, was you just remember Patrick running around like an idiot because you can't overcome, chaos and bad protection.
Right.
So that's something to consider. But I think the Chiefs team is well coached. They're well equipped. And I think they will have learned from that scenario and have a plan going into this where that is not the case. So while I like a lot of the personnel on the Eagles defense, I do think that the great thing about offense is you always have answers. And I really feel good about what the Chiefs will end up doing in terms of production.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting who they deviate to in the passing game and the run game, because look, Pacheco's kind of become the forgotten man, and Kareem Hunt has gotten a lot more of the run for Kansas City in the playoff games. And then in the receiver spot, we've had a clear number one kind of emerge in Xavier Worthy. It's not even close. Xavier Worthy's turned into their best receiver here during this playoff run. He's been terrific for them. And obviously the tight end production from Travis Kelce, just when you think the old man is washed and doesn't have anything left. And, he's had a couple of really, not so much in the Buffalo game, but he had a huge game, obviously, before that against Houston and the Texans in the divisional round. But he clearly still has something there in the tank. It sounds like to me you are making a case from a prop standpoint for Patrick Mahomes over pass attempts and Patrick Mahomes over rush attempts. It's kind of sounding like you were interested in that because Patrick Mahomes pass attempts is currently 35.5, 36.5 is what we're looking at with his his pass attempts for this game. His rush attempts number is at 5.5. And I think you said he's kind of averaged 6, right?
Yep.
Rushes.
Yep.
There you go. So if 6 will cash your ticket.
Never had less than that in a game.
I think that is worth a look, actually, because when you look at the matchup too, the Chiefs, and this is not a prop I brought up in any of the previous shows, the ones that I mentioned that I've bet already and liked. But now, after hearing what you said, that he's run for 6 times in so many games, especially these Super Bowls, you look at this matchup too. What's the one problem Kansas City's had at times this year? The tackle positions, where they haven't always held up in pass protection. And we know Philadelphia defensive line can be disruptive. It can blow up the line of scrimmage. Jalen Carter he's become so good. It's almost at the point already where he's at times unblockable up front. And so if he's forced out of the pocket and flushed out of there, he's going to have to take off and run with it. Right. So I think it's a tough matchup for a Chiefs offensive line that has shown some vulnerability at times, and the Eagles defensive front can get after it. So you factor in the history, Will, of Patrick Mahomes having at least 6 rush attempts, and the fact the matchup here may force him into having to scramble a bit more. You can make a case, I think, for over 5.5 rush attempts for Patrick Mahomes. It sounds like that makes sense to you as well.
Yep, I very much like the matchup. I just think even in general, like I totally agree with the pass rush perspective. And I think when you play in these games, you're more willing to then put your body on the line because it's the last game of the year no matter what.
Especially to make history and win your 3rd straight Super Bowl. This is history on the line for Patrick Mahomes. Yep.
Yep. So you're not worried about like, I'll make a business decision on this one because we'll live to fight another week.
Right.
And Patrick has a history of like just rattling off these like, I kind of forgot about his mobility in these games. But then in the playoffs, like he's always just got these messy, sloppy runs and he's bouncing off guys. And I just think that's the way this type of game trends. He's got 2 weeks. We all know he's had a history of ankle injuries, but he's had plenty of time to get healthy. They haven't played a lot of football in the last 2 months. So he's 29 years old. That's why I brought it up before. It's prime athletic year. So don't be surprised to see him have some production in that area. Another 2 things I wanted to point out before we move off the offense is I'm not incredibly bullish on Travis Kelce. I think he's obviously going to leave it all out there. Because, those type of players are picking their spots a little bit when you get up there in your age. But 2 people I am bullish on is DeAndre Hopkins. I thought I saw a prop for like catch and a half. I just think he's talked about his whole career wanting to play in important games. And he's
doesn't get much more important than this. Doesn't get any more important than this. Yeah.
And he's been silent since really being over there. And I just think he is a true like X receiver that gets a lot of primary targets. You're going to get one-on-one matchups. I think 2 weeks, it's important to him. He's going to be fresh. He's 32 years old. I still think he's capable of having a big game, a couple big moments. So I really like the prospect of him having some production in the yards and receptions category. I think Isaiah Pacheco was such an integral piece to this Chiefs dynasty. It's hard for me to imagine in a game like this, as he gets healthy, not having some production as well. Seeing what the Chiefs did with all the pick plays and routes out of the backfield, I imagine him getting some production in that world as well. So those are 2 players that I'm bullish on going into this matchup that I just wanted to put out there for you guys as you might look at a player prop.
I'm with you on the DeAndre Hopkins one. I can't imagine for the life of me him being that silent again in this Super Bowl. And I know he was quiet in the playoffs so far. That being said, I think he had 2 targets and 1 reception for 11 yards against Buffalo in the AFC championship game. And yeah, it wasn't much, but they've dropped his receiving yards down to as low as 10.5 for this game, which means you may only need one catch out of DeAndre Hopkins to go over 10.5 receiving yards. That's where his prop is. That's where the number is for his receiving yards prop, 10.5. And you mentioned receptions, which is a 1.5 at plus money, plus 130. All he needs is two. And I can't help but think Andy Reid, with the extra time he's got at his disposal, will find a way to get DeAndre involved, even though he has not had the impact in this passing game that we thought he might coming over in that trade midway through the season. And whether that's been familiarity and comfort, maybe it's taken him some time to get in sync. Maybe it's just, wait a minute, Xavier Worthy stepped up, and we've had certainly been able to run the football, and we've had other players make impact on offense that we haven't felt forced to have to feed the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. But I just get that sense, Will, in this game with the extra time, Andy Reid's got something in mind to get DeAndre Hopkins involved and get him to make an impact. That's the way I see it.
Yep, totally agree. Totally
Yep.
agree.
And yeah, and I like it too. I like not only, and I mentioned this on the earlier previous show, that we've done this week. Not only the receiving yards over, and you mentioned receptions, that's probably worth a look. I'm taking a shot at the plus 650 for him to score a touchdown in this game, because the one thing about Hopkins is they will target him in the red zone. A lot of his targets since he's been with the Chiefs have been in the red zone. So I find that's where he's going to be more pretty, because remember, he doesn't really have that blazing speed. Never really did, but we're talking about now older in his career, a little older, but he's got the hands, the route running ability, the big target and frame still in the red zone for Patrick Mahomes. So that touchdown price, which is as high as plus 650 on DeAndre Hopkins, I think is worth a shot in this game. No doubt. All right, let's flip it. Talk Kansas City offense versus Philly defense. How about Philadelphia offense versus Kansas City defense? The biggest thing, I'm sure you're going to hit on it, and the biggest key for Kansas City's defense is, can you do something that other teams have not been able to do against Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I go back, and it's hard doing it with words, but Steve Spagnuolo does a great job when you watch their stuff on film of creating illusions and trapdoors and what you think. Philadelphia has the benefit of making life really simple. Kellen Moore, I actually thought, did a great job of this when he was with Dak Prescott in his early years, of like when they had Ezekiel Elliott and they had this really awesome O-line and a strong run game, of like, it's very simple. When you have a strong run game, you can then dictate like one-on-one matchups on the outside with good playmakers to then like win their respective matchups. And it was just a very simple thought process. And they've done a lot of that with Jalen Hurts because of their O-line and obviously Saquon Barkley. I have to say, in terms of this matchup, everyone's so bullish on Saquon Barkley because of the year that he's had. I think in a game like this, with the amount of preparation and time and focus that you have to stopping what makes them go, I don't see him breaking these big runs or having a lapse in a coverage or assignment. And I think when you get close, the tush push, the situational stuff, he's not a ram it in there back. I think Saquon Barkley's production will be just modest in my projection. In terms of what I like about.
So you wouldn't bet him over 110.5 rushing yards then?
No, and I wouldn't do the anytime touchdown. What I do like in that world, if we're going to talk about it, is Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. Obviously, being a quarterback, but I'm just talking about in games like this where the execution and everything is very well accounted for and it's tighter, you're going to get a possession where it's going to get down close to the red zone, and that's just where tush pushes, and you can almost just put a Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown in your pocket. He's going to be integral in them keeping pace in this game. He hasn't had a great year in terms of production, but
and there were concerns about his knee. I just wanted to say that you had concerns about his knee in the NFC Championship game, and I thought he was going to be limited running the football, not much mobility. Yet as that game went along, maybe his knee loosened up or whatever, but he got that run going. And now you got to think, with the 2 weeks off, I'm not that worried anymore about the status of that knee injury for Jalen Hurts going into this game. You got to think he'll be, at or near, 90, 100%.
Yep. And there is something to be said about the production he had 2 years ago in this game. He was awesome. So I look to Jalen to have a really productive day, and I look for Saquon to be accounted for because that is what Steve Spagnuolo is going to want to do. He's going to try to create trap doors, but most importantly, he's going to make an effort to stop the run. And Chris Jones and company are well equipped enough to hold their own inside. And Saquon is not a downhill, jam it down your throat back. He's a short pop. And I just don't know if he's going to get those pops or those opportunities to score in this game. That said, they have terrific playmakers. They're going to make their plays, whether it's Devontae Smith or an A.J. Brown. They're going to get their shots in one-on-one coverage and make their plays, and that's ultimately, I think, how they're going to get their production and score points. In terms of Kansas City, I think they're going to be great situationally. I think they're going to confuse Philadelphia with all the exotic blitzes and the illusions that they create. And I just love what Spags does in big spots.
He
And
mixes it up. He does. Yep.
it totally keeps you on your toes, makes you feel really uneasy for an offense that prides itself on simplicity and the dictating the circumstances. So in that regard, an interesting matchup of like brain versus brawn. So it'll be a really, really cool matchup to see.
That's bold, man. Saquon will not score a touchdown, in your opinion, here. And this, it means you should be taking that plus 155 price that's out there on him not to score a touchdown. Man, that is one hell of a, like, if you buy into that he's not scoring a touchdown, it's plus 155 because you got to actually lay minus 180, minus 200. So you got to risk 200 to win 100 on him to score a touchdown, Saquon Barkley. So if you believe in that, I'm going to have to see it before I believe it that he's completely shut down because certainly he ran amok against the Rams. He ran amok against Washington. Now, Washington is not that impressive because Washington's run defense has been bottom tier in the NFL most of the season. But to be able to run over the Rams was pretty good. And in both games, he had at least one long run. So I'm on the fence with the rushing yards. Like, I don't know if I've got the guts to bet him under, but 110.5 is a huge number to go over. What I like, if I'm going to bet any Saquon prop, it's the longest rush. And I mentioned that previously.
Yeah.
Over 23.5 rushing yards, or over 23.5 for his longest rush. He got the one thing about Barkley is he's had, a 70 and an 80-yard run in the last two games against the Rams and the Commanders in the playoffs. And Kansas City did give up a 33-yard run to James Cook of the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. So 33-yard run here for Saquon Barkley cashes that ticket. So I think that's the best approach there would be Barkley longest rush over 20, which has been a cash cow, by the way. It's been cashing repeatedly here of late for the Philadelphia Eagles. But I like that brazen take there from Will Arndt that he's not so sure Saquon Barkley is going to find the end zone here in this Super Bowl, which, and like I said, Kansas City statistically, their numbers against the run aren't that bad, actually. Pretty solid. But this is a special kind of running back that's had a special kind of season. That'll be put to the test. Who just won, by the way, the Offensive Player of the Year award at the NFL Honors leading up to Super Bowl week, and deservedly so. He's obviously had an incredible season. I've been sure if you've played in the past, when you've played in the past, and in your season that's about to start in San Antonio, you could only dream of playing with a running back like that to support you in that offense.
No, totally. I mean, I've always thought he's a specimen. I always found it a little bit puzzling why it just never came together in New York. But it's been,
team wasn't good. O-line stunk. I think it was a combination of forces and factors.
Yeah. Going back to the point on why I said what I said, I don't think it's because of the type of player I think he is. I think he's got a little, growing up as a Vikings fan, he's got a little bit of that home run hitter, Adrian Peterson thing, where it's not a lot of production, and then all of a sudden he pops one for 60. And I just don't think you're going to get that in this game based on the confluence of factors of time, preparation, this defensive coordinator, some of the personnel they have, a running quarterback that's healthy that has 2 weeks. 110 yards in this game when you're the primary thing to stop. It just something tells me that you're not going to see fireworks in that department.
I like that. Great analysis and breakdowns. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more props, and of course, at the end, we'll have a best bet. I'll try to give you a different one. I'm trying to give you a different best bet to end the show with each guest that I've had. So I'll try to think of a different one, a unique one, because I've got obviously a ton of player props that I've bet here. We'll try to give you a different one this time around. But final decision, I guess you could say, side and total. Like you like Kansas City, it sounds like, right? Even though, because it sounded like at the beginning, and that's, to me, that's where this comes down to, is that I think the Philadelphia Eagles, there's a lot of areas of their roster and their player personnel that are better than Kansas City's. I admit that, and especially in the trenches, Philadelphia matches up pretty solidly. At the end of the day, I can't get past the ability for Kansas City to step up, win these big games time and time again, with Andy Reid with the extra time to prepare, where he's been phenomenal. I know there's that stat out there as well that Patrick Mahomes in his career has never lost to a Vic Fangio coordinated defense. That is something also that's very interesting. He's never lost against a defense coordinated by Vic Fangio, who, of course, is the DC for Philadelphia. And, of course, going for history. And there's no blatant conspiracy to rig it in Kansas City's favor with the officiating and the calls, but there's no doubt the majority of 50-50 calls that could go either way go to Kansas City. Let's call it for what it is. That's what it is. And oftentimes the best teams and the best player, in this case quarterback, often get the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's what we see. So that could influence things and tilt the scales a little bit in Kansas City. But, and I also, what is it? It's 7-0 or 8-0 now against the spread run for Patrick Mahomes in games lined at -3 or lower. So pick him to -3. He's like 8-0 ATS his last 8 games. It's just, there's so many things that I just don't want to be that guy that says, yeah, let's bet against the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, when they've already shown us so much of how they're able to consistently get it done in these spots. And I think you're on the Chiefs as well.
Yes, sir. And the chips are down. I just like them to find a way to get it done. I don't know how it's going to look, but I do know if you find them in a spot where they get 4 cracks at it, I will take them 7 days a week, twice on Sunday. And, you look back on some of the stats of, Patrick Mahomes' record when he's down like 10 points, like in the playoffs, it's like 7-1. It's unbelievable
stuff. The first one he won against San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo years ago, they were down by 10 in the fourth quarter, I remember, in that game, and they came back and won. Yep.
So I think whether they jump out behooves them, obviously, or whether they find themselves in a hole, I think you could see them winning in either fashion. And if Philadelphia finds themselves in a hole, I don't think that's how they're built to play football or dig themselves out of that hole. So from that standpoint, however the game starts and ends up flowing, I think Kansas City can have a multitude of ways to find a way to get it done.
All right, the total 48.5. Where do you kind of side with that? Higher scoring or lower scoring here, in your opinion?
Oh, gosh. I struggled with this one. I
did too. I did not make a bet on this total, and I've said that on the previous show. I did not bet this total. I think from a pace standpoint, it's going to play to an under pace, because both of these teams are capable of these 6, 7, 8-minute time-consuming drives, and that's not good if you're betting an over. But I also could see a great degree of efficiency when these teams get the football inside the 20, where they're not going to settle for field goals too much, and they're going to punch in touchdowns, which would help you if you're on the over. So I think it's a very interesting debate. Not to mention, they put the number in a really good spot, 48.5. A 27-21, 27-24 type of game, flirting right around that high 40s, almost 50 type number for total points in the game seems about right. So I haven't bet the total. I don't expect to. What I will probably do is, because I could see this starting off slowly, is there are some things I'm leaning towards some of these props where there's no points, no score in the first 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. You can bet those props as well. And then things start to open up as the game goes on. We even saw it last year. It was a very low scoring start to the game. And then in the second quarter, the points started to happen. And I think even with the Chiefs and Eagles, actually that was very high scoring. That one flew over the total. The last time these teams played each other in the Super Bowl, but a little bit of a different dynamic and obviously different ways of going about it now. for these two teams. So the total, I'll be honest, I'm totally neutral when it comes to this total, and it sounds like you're in the same boat.
Yeah, I'm with you. If I didn't have to touch it, I wouldn't. Uh, I feel like with a platform like this, having 2 weeks to prepare, I feel like naturally there's always that feeling each other out boxing dynamic early in a game. You go through a drive, and even if when you punt, you just feel like, okay, that's good. Now we've got a little film. Like, what are they doing? Like, how is this going to influence my play calling? Okay, you're looking to set up the next punch per se. And I see this as the game that could very well heat up in the second half if that's how you want to play it in terms of the point total. But at the same time, 2 years ago was a fireworks show. So in that regard, I want to say, to your point, that these teams are either going to go for it or have good setups to score touchdowns and not field goals when they get down there. So that bodes well for the over. But there's just too many variables in this matchup and in this circumstance for me to want to touch this one. But ultimately, I think teams end up scoring points, just might come a little bit later down the road.
Yeah, no doubt. Certainly, fourth down conversion. Certainly, we'll talk about fourth down successful conversions, but fourth down conversion attempts in this game, I would not want to be betting the under. We know Philadelphia and a lot of teams are like this now. Go for it more often than not. And so you could see that a lot of times, especially when you're in that no man's land of inside the 40 where you don't really want to try a long field goal, but you're also 4th and 3. You're not punting, so you're going to go for it ultimately. So, and that's something that can impact these totals as well, that kind of thought process. All right. Any more player props that you want to mention, Will, or is there a player that you like? I think I like over or under something with a certain player. You can mention who that player is. I can always look up the number and see if that's something you'd be interested in. Is there any other player prop type of situation you're looking at for either side, Chiefs or Eagles?
No, I don't want to get bored with the basics. So the players that I am bullish on in this game in terms of production, from the Philadelphia standpoint, Jalen Hurts. I think there's going to be a multitude of ways for him to score touchdowns, whether that is as a true runner, whether that's on the tush push, whether that's trailing Kansas City and needing to throw touchdowns and having one-on-one opportunities to throw the ball versus one high safeties because they're trying to stop Saquon, and you have terrific athletes on the outside that you can throw those 50-50 balls that end up being actually 70-30s when you have the receivers that they have. So I like Jalen Hurts in that regard. Patrick Mahomes, history of high volume, high production in these types of games, whether he's winning and jumping out to a lead and scoring points, or whether that's trailing and then having a high usage rate from there. I think that they're going to empty the clip. He's going to run the ball. He's going to throw the ball. And I think that ultimately ends up boding well for the DeAndre Hopkins of the world, which are more the sleeper receivers than the guys that are talked about like Xavier Worthy or Travis Kelce. The Noah Grays that will get used, here and there. But I think Isaiah Pacheco is going to have some production in this game. He's been in this game. He's fresh. He's healthy. He's going to have a lot to prove. So I like those players on that regard on the Kansas City side. Isaiah Pacheco catching the ball out of the backfield, rush yards, DeAndre Hopkins receiving yards and catches, and then Patrick Mahomes in terms of general production. So don't want to get bored with the basics. Those are the guys that I've thought long and hard about and feel good about them.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that. You target, you isolate the players you think are going to make the biggest impact in the game, and you roll with them. That's what you should be doing when there's 500 fucking props in the game. Right. Isolate it, trim it down. Look at the players you're most in, that you think are going to have matchup advantages and could make the biggest impact. And just to recap quickly, because you heard this already on the previous shows, for my props that I'm liking both tight ends, I will admit. Kelce for Kansas City, Goddard for Philadelphia. Goddard's been targeted a ton by Hurts. He's gone over his receptions and receiving yards repeatedly. Kansas City all year has struggled to defend tight ends, so Dallas Goedert to be involved. And then, of course, Kelce, and even to a lesser extent Gray, but specifically Kelce, because of the fact since Nakobe Dean got injured early in the playoffs for Philadelphia at the linebacker spot, look what the opposing tight ends have done to that Philadelphia D. Look what Tyler Higbee did for the LA Rams. He had a big game and big production. Zach Ertz for Washington in the NFC Championship game. And I know your boy and our mutual friend Trevor Harris. He loved Zach Ertz props for the Washington Commanders against the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and Trevor was right on with that, liking those props, and certainly he had a big game against Philadelphia, even though the Commanders lost. So they are more vulnerable defending the tight ends with the loss of Dean at the linebacker spot. So he could open the door for Kansas City. I mentioned Xavier Worthy. Yes, I've been riding receiving yards and receptions with him, and I'm on it again, but more so with him this time around, the rushing yards over 5.5, because I think Andy's going to use Xavier Worthy with the aggressiveness of that front for Philadelphia against them, use it against them, get Worthy on the edge in these jet sweeps, end around type of plays in space. And that's where, and it counts as a rush attempt, not a reception if you use Xavier Worthy in that fashion. So I think he can get that 6 rushing yards on a play like that here in this game. So that's one I like as well. And like I said, Barkley over longest rush. I think Jalen Hurts with his passing yards, it's starting to move up a bit, but for most of the week, Jalen Hurts passing yards prop has been below 200. And I just thought it was a little too low, because what if they're trailing in this game, which is plausible? They are a slight underdog. Asking Jalen Hurts to have 200 passing yards, it's not much these days in the NFL. So I felt the over passing yards was probably worth a shot there with Jalen Hurts here in this game. And you actually kind of taught me into the Patrick Mahomes stuff with the pass attempts and the rush attempts for Mahomes. And the rush attempts in particular, Will, though that might be better than betting his rushing yards, because kneel downs at the end of the game count toward rushing yards. So if they're in victory formation, you're going to lose 2, 3, 4 yards per kneel down at the end in this football game. I've seen that before.
Yep.
So sometimes it just to your benefit with the quarterback rushing props, a little bit safer to go with rush attempts than it is rushing yards, just in case you get Kansas City victorious. And I've seen it happen. I really have, where the victory formation 2 or 3 times at the end when you're running out the clock, and it takes a better from winning and cashing a quarterback over rushing yards to losing it because of the kneel downs and the lost yardage. Something to keep in mind for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and one more note on the rushing yards for Patrick Mahomes. He has never gone for less than 30 yards, except one time when he ran for 29. And in that game, he scored a rushing touchdown. So pretty consistent track record of him being able to make that a part of his game in these big spots.
No doubt. There you have it. That's great analysis there from Will Arndt. Great to have Will back with us here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. We've had a great run of shows. First of all, Philip Nelson, my guest all year. Of all weeks, we couldn't get him for the Super Bowl because it just happened that he's on vacation away out of the country for a wedding this week. But he just a great contributor all season to Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Of course, it was great for a couple of shows as well to have Trevor Harris and Davis Alexander, two guys that are outstanding CFL quarterbacks. I think they're both going to have outstanding seasons. Trevor's been like a fine wine. He's gotten better with age. And certainly Davis Alexander is going to have his first season as a starting quarterback in the CFL with Montreal. Both of them, I think, primed for big seasons. And they were great on the last couple shows with us. John Torchio, great job. We've had just so many great guests. And Will Arndt, of course, multiple times on this show, including today as well, with great analysis here from people that have played the game. That's why we get people like this on the show. They've been in the huddle before, and they know what's going on on that football field. All right, we're going to wrap things up with Super Bowl 59 best bet. The pressure's on. I don't know if anything, Will, that you may give for your best bet here will top your prediction back in July on this show of a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl, but I know you will try your best. Will, what do you got for your Super Bowl best bet?
My Super Bowl best bet is going to be calling the score. We're going to go Chiefs win 29-23. And you can book Taylor Swift on the field after and enjoying that dub with her hubby, Travis Kelce.
There you go. All right. I'll have to remember that. If you hit this, if you get this correct as well, That's going to make that Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl prediction look weak. If you're hitting successfully 29-23, Kansas City is you know what I like about that final score prediction? It leaves room for a missed 2-point conversion somewhere. That's how you get 29 probably. Someone misses a 2-point conversion. Someone has 23, they get a touchdown. 29, they go for 2 to make it 31, and they don't get it. That kind of thing. And that's why you got to sometimes think outside the box, give a little bit of a different correct score, especially now in this day and age. As you know, Will, teams are going for 2-point conversions a lot more as well after scoring a touchdown. So there you go, 29-23 Kansas City with the correct score prediction there for the Super Bowl for Will Arndt. I will give you for best bet, I'm just going to go to it, Saquon Barkley longest rush over 23.5, minus 130. I think he goes over that number. The Chiefs, even though they're decent against the run, they did give up a 33-yard run to James Cook. Saquon's has cashed his longest rush prop in all 3 playoff games so far, including over this number in the last 2. So Saquon Barkley over 23.5 yards, longest rush. We'll go with that for the best bet for this edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Will, awesome stuff. Anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to take a moment and just speak on behalf of your listeners that Ian's the best, guys. We're very lucky to have him and the analysis and insight and platform that he gives to all you guys. So take a moment and give a little shout out to Ian. Let him know you appreciate him and as much as I do. And just wanted to give you a little salute.
Certainly work our ass off, so I appreciate it, definitely. And especially at this time of year, Super Bowl week, always hectic. And then not to mention what also is going on with hockey, football, or hockey, basketball, all the other sports going on as well. I do have to ask before we wrap it up, your Minnesota Vikings, give us a little thumbnail on the way their season ended and what you expect moving forward.
Yeah, that was tough. Yeah, I always looked at the year it was like house money. Nobody expected us to do good. There wasn't expectations.
Are you happy that they re-upped with Kevin O'Connell long term?
Oh, yeah, he's great. I don't want to have a recency bias, but I've never felt as good about a coach as I have as OC. Because I've had like Dennis Greens and Mike Zimmers, and they're very just don't mess it up, defensive, play it safe, and he's young, he's energetic, he has his fingers in the game because he's calling plays. Guys seem to love him. He's good in big spots. He's quick to take the blame. I've really enjoyed him as a head coach, and I'm excited to have that for some time to come as a fan of the team. And, obviously what he does with quarterbacks is just a bonus from there. So that'll be interesting to see, though, how that plays out in the future with what we're going to do at quarterback. They got some decisions and things to go through.
It's got to be J.J. McCarthy time. This is not to be disrespectful to Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold had a great regular season, but once those games got really critical, he kind of shit the bed. He kind of struggled. So I think you got to give J.J. McCarthy his chance. You drafted him. You got to see what you got in him. I think you turn the quarterback, the keys of the quarterback spot over to J.J. McCarthy next year. That's what I would do. Great stuff. We appreciate Will Arndt joining us here. For Will Arndt, I'm Ian Cameron. There's been another Super Bowl 59 edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy the game and good luck. And thanks again for tuning in to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.